Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be talking about how you can set up your first website. Let's get started. One of the first things that any business owner needs to do in this online age is create a website. And if you created a website before, then you know the process and it becomes a lot easier to figure out what you need and what you don't. And there's a lot less overthinking. And also you have the technical experience too. But as a new business owner, not everyone understands how to set up a website. And luckily we're in that place where technology has advanced to the point where you can now rely on things like templates and website builders to create a website very seamlessly. That said, there's still some strategy that needs to be decided and realized if you want to create a website that's going to be effective, because while website builders are great, you need to make sure that everything is working to ensure business growth, which at the end of the day is why business owners spend so much time perfecting their websites and putting new content on their websites. And I think this episode is going to be a mixture of talking about how to actually set up your website, but also how to use it as a marketing channel effectively. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. My first tip for creating your very first website is to choose the right host and also choose the right domain name. And what you decide to go for will entirely depend on a few factors. I think for small business owners, the most important factor, at least it was and still is for me, is pricing. But also I think you want to look at value for money, because you want to think about, obviously, okay, what are your goals for your website now is really key, but then you also want to think about how you want to expand it in the future. And some website providers and hosts are a lot better at helping small business owners grow than others. They already account for the fact that you may want to expand and use your website more heavily over the years, whereas some plans are very basic and only really let you have a certain amount of space and bandwidth, and that can be really limiting, especially if you're like me and you want to use your website to create a resource library for your users to head over to whenever they need help. So you need to consider that. I would also think about how much a domain is going to be every year. You can typically purchase domains separately, and that's what I would recommend. The main reason for that is that it allows you to move freely with less headache. So if you've set up your domain and it's connected to one provider, because it's not attached to that provider, then you will be in a better space for actually going somewhere else, because it's not part of the package, it's separate. But that said, if price is a real factor for you, then you may want to consider getting your domain within the plan for the first year and then seeing how it goes. And then obviously if you want to expand and change providers because it's not working out for you, or you need something different at a different time in your business, then that's a strategy that I would take. So you also want to consider how you're going to be able to set up your website. And obviously if you're technically advanced, then this might not be such an issue for you. But for a lot of us business owners, we don't have the technical know-how to create a website from scratch. So you want to think about ease of use as well. I personally use Wix, and the main reason I do it is because I think the pricing is very reasonable, but also I like the fact that I don't have to do much to update my website. I have a lot of ideas of how I want my website to look, and sometimes I also want to test things as well to see how they perform, and if they don't really do as well as I'd hoped, then I can just remove them from my website within a click of a button. Whereas with code, you'd have to go back and find that piece of code and always run the risk of something potentially going wrong just because of lack of knowledge, or because you've deleted something or there's an error in the code. So I think that just just provides me with the agility that I personally want for my business. And also it's just really easy to set up a website. I do like WordPress. I like WordPress a lot, but I do find that sometimes the themes, unless you have coding knowledge, which I'm lucky to have a little bit, it can be very difficult to actually change anything to the point where it's very much on brand. Obviously, you can change the colors and things like that, but at some point you may want to add some more design elements that need to be part of that theme if you want to implement them. So there are things to bear in mind there. And you also want to think about what your actual domain name should be. And obviously, if you've come up with a business name that's not personal brand, then you just use that business name. Although some people like to actually just have a personal brand and then advertise their own business on there through another website, which is what I'm considering doing at the moment. But I think at the beginning, when you're trying to establish your brand and also increase brand awareness, actually having a branded website is really key. That said, obviously, if you're setting up a personal brand as a service provider or you're selling products and you need to set up a shop, then obviously you would choose whatever name for that shop or your own name is. And also it's important to consider the availability of your domain name as well. I think at the beginning it's important not to get too attached to a name. I think it's a good idea to generate a lot of different ideas so that way if it turns out that the original name that you wanted isn't available, then you can research until you get the one that you want. So whether it's a .co.uk or a .com. For some people, .com is really important to get, but for me, obviously being in the UK, I'm happy with .co.uk and I managed to get what I wanted. I couldn't actually get .com because that was already taken. So just bear that in mind when you're coming up with names, because it can be really disheartening to have a vision and be really attached to it and then not see it come to fruition. Whereas if you're a bit more agile and flexible, then it's a lot easier to carry on. My next tip for setting up your website is to think about the actual structure of your website. And a lot of people in the beginning get really carried away with how they want to set up their website, and they'll have lots of different landing pages and just a lot of clutter that they don't really need. But I think at its very core, the best website structures tend to be the most simple, because that is perfect for user experience. Your user is going to be able to navigate around a very simplified version of your website. Obviously, over time, you can expand this to make sure that your pages are more targeted and that you may choose to have, for example, landing pages for paid ads, as we spoke about in a previous episode. But I think that it's important to just stick to the very basics, because it will be easier for you to set up, and then once you set it up, you can obviously start promoting yourself, and then over time you can expand. So with this in mind, the key pages to have, in my personal opinion, are your home page. You also want to have a contact page, an about us page, depending on your business, a pricing page or service page. And also, in my personal opinion, you're going to want to set up a blog as well. And obviously how you utilize that blog will be different depending on your content strategy. So if you're more into video, for example, then you can just create a simple blog post that's titled whatever the name of the video is titled, and then you can create a little bit of text and then implement the video. But obviously if you're using your website in conjunction with your SEO strategy, then you're going to want to start creating original content over there. So that will depend entirely on what your approach is to your blog. But those are the key pages that I would recommend having. And the homepage, in my opinion, is the thing that you should focus on the most. And the reason for this is that in the beginning, it's likely going to be the page that people come from the most, especially if, say, for example, you're just getting started writing blog content and you're trying to target some keywords, but it takes so long to rank for certain keywords, especially if they're really competitive. So you're not going to get that organic traffic in the beginning. Whereas obviously if you're promoting your website on your social media and you already have a little bit of a following there, chances are you're going to want to send them straight to your homepage. And I think that because of this, you need to make sure sure that it's curated with the idea that new visitors can easily find the information that they're looking for in different sections. So just to give you an example of what I mean, my website is very much geared towards conversions, and it's split up into different sections on the home page. So at the very top, I have a button where users can book a discovery call. I also have a sticky bar of a advertisement for paid plans too, and that's just because I know it's a popular thing that people look at. So I just thought, why not put it up there as one of the first things that people see? And then obviously there's a link to go to that page. And then I also have a little strip where there's just an image of a girl. It's not me at the moment, so I need to get some kind of professional photography. So that's one of my goals for the end of the year. But other than that, it also has like a little bio explaining what Megan's Daily Creative is, the fact that we are a full service content marketing agency. And then I talk about services we provide. And then below that description, there is a button where people can see plans, or they can also follow us on social media as well. And then I also have a customer review just to split things up and to give a little bit of social proof as well, to show customers immediately, okay, this is a legitimate website. And then below that, I go into more detail about services, and I have all the relevant services, a button to go to the plan. And then also, if I don't have a plan for that particular service, they can just schedule to book a call. So it's really simple and easy for them to understand how to get started. And then below that, I have an About Us page. And obviously, I've already given the user a bit of insight into what Megan's Daily Creative is. So I didn't think it was that important to have the About Us section be below the very first section that people see. And then there's a button for our coffee page, just in case people follow us on social media, like our content, and they want to support us. And then again, I go into a bit of the backstory of Megan's Daily Creative in further detail this time, and explain what our core services are, and then explain how you can get in contact with us. And then I have another sticky bar situation explaining our blog writing services too. And then underneath that, I have some more testimonials. And then the last sections on the homepage are a strip where you can sign up to join the newsletter. And also I have just a who we work with section at the bottom, because that's going to signify to your customers that you kind of know who you're targeting, but also they'll feel more comfortable approaching you because they know that you've got that experience. So yeah, that's obviously a very brief rundown of my homepage, and I'm not going to go into the rest of the pages too heavily, just because I feel like they're quite self-explanatory. Obviously, with a blog, you need to have blog content and blog posts, and how you design your blog is up to you, and that's a whole nother conversation, which I would need a lot more time for. And then obviously, contact page, you can just have some more information about why they should work with you specifically, and then a contact form, which is the most important thing there. And then the plans and pricing page, which is what I have on my website, or a services page, just needs to be a very clear rundown of all the services or products that you offer. Once you've set up each page on your website that you know you're going to have, you now need to actually write copy for your website. And I think this is the part that business owners really get overwhelmed with if they've not written copy before. It's very easy to get lost in copy if you don't know what to write. You can write pages and pages of text that are completely irrelevant and aren't going to help you in the long run as far as achieving your business goals. So I would be very selective and write the most important pieces of information that you can in your copy. So explain things like who you are, but most importantly, why you can help your audience. I think a lot of small business owners make the mistake of actually focusing on themselves and their story too much on their website, rather than focusing on their customers, who at the end of the day are going to make your business grow. So just make sure that you're focusing on your customer needs, addressing their pain points, evidence and then showing specifically through your copy across your website how you can actually transform their lives for the better. And the most prominent pages to do this, in my opinion, are the About Us page, but also the pricing page, because that's going to give your website visitors a very clear understanding of what you can actually do. But also you can sprinkle this throughout your homepage as well. I've used a lot of testimonials on my homepage, and that's concrete evidence of how my services, that they can see what the service was and then obviously how I helped them. So that's a really useful quick fire way of demonstrating that without taking up too much space. So yeah, just bear that in mind. You don't want your copy to be too long. You want it to be straight to the point and you want it to be focused directly on the customer. I would also spend quite a lot of time working on your copy for your About Us page. Again, a lot of business owners kind of get this wrong and focus too much on their brand story. And whilst it's important to show how your brand came to be and your brand's evolution, which I would update over time as you reach certain milestones, just to show that you're not stagnant and that you are changing and adaptable, which is really promising for any future customers. I would focus specifically on things like your brand values and, more importantly, how that's going to impact the customer. So for example, with my particular About Us page, I have our vision section, and then directly underneath that I have our values. And the way I've written them is essentially to talk about what they are, but more importantly how it's going to impact the way that the work is delivered to the client, and also how we communicate with the client as well, and how this will impact their life for the better. So for example, one of our primary values is timeliness. I've always been really type A and I love having a deadline. I find it gives me new life in a really weird way, and I just have a newfound motivation to do work and work on my business. So I've made that one of my core values just because that's something that's really important to me. And I also know from just working with clients in the past that timeliness is also really important to them. I've also put kindness as one of my core values, and I think that's because I want to show customers that when you approach my business, you will get a friendly face and someone who understands that things change and I may need to be adaptable, and it's just someone to have a friendly conversation with whenever I have a client strategy call or a discovery call. I just want people to know that, understand that at the end of the day, none of us is superhuman. We all have feelings and emotions, and I will consider that whenever I'm interacting with you. So yeah, it's just things like this that give your brand a personality and help your customers understand who they're working with. And as I said before, I have an Our Vision section too, and I think I just wanted to explain more about creative content marketing in this particular section, but I've already done an episode on the 7 principles of creative content marketing, which I need to update on my own website, which just goes to show that I'm not perfect and everyone has things that they need to do that they just haven't done for whatever reason. So yeah, I will also link that episode in the show notes and put a card as well. That would be my advice on writing an About Us page. And also, I forgot to mention this in the actual structure section, but depending on your business structure, if you're a service provider, you want to have a writing a portfolio. So for example, I have a writing portfolio as that's my main service that I work on, but I also have like a creative portfolio too that people can view and see the sort of creative work that I do for social media management and things like that. And you won't need too much copy here. In fact, I think the less copy you have for your portfolio, the better. The work should show the true value. So you may want to have like a little, this was for this client if you can, and what the project was. I know some people like to do a case study type portfolio where they put what the project was, what the problem was, and then what the solution was. But I feel like that only really works with, say, agencies, for example, where a lot of the services they provide is very much problem solving. Obviously, we are solving a problem, all of us, but I mean like directly solving problems every day. So that's my take on it and why I've approached my portfolio the way I have done. The last thing I want to talk about for setting up your website is actually the design of your website. And I've kind of touched on this earlier on in the episode, so I won't go on too much, but the most important thing to remember is consistency. And users will notice when something is different, and that actually signifies to them that whoever set up the website hasn't really put the time or the effort to make sure that the little details are spot on, and that starts to negatively impact how they view you, essentially. So I would be really careful to spend a lot. That's probably what I would spend the most time on, at least in the beginning, because you can refine copy over time, your messaging will change, and you'll want to update that. But design, especially if you've got your branding down, that needs to be concrete, especially from the beginning. Obviously, lots of businesses go through rebranding, especially like big corporations, they rebrand all the time. But for the time being, just make sure that everything is on point and look at the little details and make sure that the text is all the same. And yeah, just the little things that really make a big difference to your user experience. Focus on those and spend the most time doing that in the beginning. So yeah, that was it. That was everything that I have to speak to you about in this episode. I kind of touched upon how your website kind of influences your content strategy with things like SEO on your website, not just blog content, but also your landing pages as well. That's very crucial to success. You'll want to ensure that your landing pages are targeted, not just the keywords, but for your audience too. I personally like to have lots of different targeted landing pages on my website, and that's something that I'm currently working on. With my email provider ConvertKit, you can create different landing pages and then implement them into your website and then capture their information that way. So that's something that I've learned and really practiced over the years, is creating individual landing pages. And that's probably a separate episode that I can do in the future that I will talk about. But for the most part, SEO and your website should really work together to ensure business growth and to increase the visibility of your website. So whenever you're writing copy or you're designing a website, you need to think about user experience, because user experience is an SEO factor as well that Google looks at. So all these things combine together to making a successful website. And I really hope that this helped those people who maybe aren't so familiar with creating a website. I'm really lucky in the fact that I've had quite a bit of experience creating websites before, and I learned a lot about it in my degree as well. So I have that background knowledge, but I understand it took me a while to get my head around it. And just because it's second nature to me now doesn't mean that it always was. So I wanted to really look at this episode from a fresh perspective, because at the end of the day, a lot of business owners will be coming into this with little knowledge, and that's not a bad thing. We're in such a lucky time where technology has advanced to the point where we can now create some really kind of cool website designs without much knowledge or code or anything like that. So I think that if you just go into it with a fresh perspective and that you're willing to learn as well, learning is really key, then you'll be fine. So yeah, as always, if you really enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're listening to this on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, please follow us over there to be notified every time that there is a new episode available. And if you would like to work with Megan Taylor Creative for website content, whether that be copywriting services or content writing services, please feel free to DM me on social media or head over to our website and book a discovery call. I'll leave all the information in the show notes so that you can get started working with us. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.